The kingdom that never came. Many Christians are fixated on the kingdom that Jesus preached in Israel. For some, this kingdom has been turned into a feeling of happiness, a moment of health, or a life without sickness or problems. However, it's important to remember that Jesus himself lived in poverty, much like Lazarus the beggar. The difference is that Jesus could feed multitudes without using money. When Christians read about Jesus, they often desire the same kind of instant prosperity that was promised to the Jews. Yet today, many find themselves led into loving money due to not knowing God stopped performing miracles. Has anyone fed thousands without money involved since Jesus? So, what happened to the kingdom that Jesus preached? The short answer is, it hasn't come yet. The kingdom was prophesied to bring peace and righteousness to Israel and a blessing to the world that would come from Zion. This kingdom was to usher in longer life, the end of curses, hunger, sadness, and injustice. When Jesus came, he declared that the kingdom was at hand, but still yet to come. He also said that the kingdom was meant for the lost sheep of Israel, not for us, the Gentiles. The kingdom was to come with signs and wonders, and Jesus provided a taste of the power so that the Jews might believe. But for a kingdom to exist, it needs a king. Israel had no king at the time, and while Jesus is the king of the Jews, he was crucified. This was devastating news for his followers, particularly Peter. Then Jesus was resurrected, ascended to heaven, and promised to return. All of this was prophesied, that Jesus would be born, die, be buried, and be raised on the third day. He would leave, but he would also return to establish the kingdom. The Jews waited daily for his return, but after the great persecution, many left Jerusalem. Then Jesus could not return to Zion, as there were only 12 disciples that remained. Did Jesus give the kingdom to the 12 apostles? Obviously not. So why do some Christians today believe the kingdom has already come, as if the signs and wonders are happening now? It's important to note that Peter preached about a physical kingdom for Israel, a restoration for they were conquered by Rome. Some preachers today claim the spiritual kingdom of God is in their hearts, evidenced by their speaking in tongues. However, Peter never preached that the kingdom of God was in their hearts. He said it was still yet to come. Paul, on the other hand, preached about God making your heart his kingdom, a spiritual kingdom that comes once you believe in Paul's gospel. But Paul was not a believer at Pentecost, and his teachings were initially unknown to Peter and found them difficult to understand. So what happened to Christian teachings? Over time, Christendom mixed or switched Paul's teachings about the spiritual kingdom with Peter's gospel about the physical kingdom. They began to say that the kingdom of God is in your heart if you obey Jesus, but this is not found in the Bible. The spiritual kingdom, according to Paul, doesn't deal with food or drink. In fact, Paul warned against those who prohibit eating certain foods. Meanwhile, the physical kingdom preached by Jesus had dietary restrictions, such as not eating blood. Jesus also regarded Gentiles as dogs or aliens in the kingdom. But Paul taught that in the spiritual kingdom, there is no distinction between Jew and Gentile. The two kingdoms, spiritual and physical, have opposite instructions, and mixing or switching them leads to confusion, so nothing could be obeyed. Paul warned against following the doctrines of men, which can seem holy but are not necessarily obedient to God. Paul was referring to those who have switched or mixed the kingdoms, ignoring his instruction to rightly divide the word of truth. Paul also said not to follow Jesus after the flesh anymore, yet Christendom has insisted on doing so. What's the result? A perversion of the two gospels, the gospel of Peter and the gospel of Paul. Peter preached a gospel that required works and was directed toward Israel, promising a physical kingdom that has not yet come. On the other hand, Paul preached a gospel that did not require works to be saved, teaching that the believer's heart becomes God's kingdom. By switching or mixing these two gospels, Christendom has created a distortion of the message of Christ. This created a doctrine of devils, where people, often unaware, claim to be ministers of righteousness. Do you now see how the Bible can be misused to keep people from understanding the gospel for us?